The Louie T Network is powered by MusicHead University. MusicHeads, classes in session. Turn me up. Enroll on YouTube now. Link is in the description.
Who else could it be? For me, your man, Louie T. Welcome to the Command Post Live. You know what it is. Post up. Take command. I, of course, am Commander-in-Chief, Louie T. Thank you for joining me. So phase 2 of OTAs got underway today. We heard from a number of players. We heard from head coach Dan Quinn. Some interesting tidbits were dropped on us today that I think is very pertinent to discuss. Now, again, it's early. I think Dan Quinn did a great job of verbalizing what this period is all about. And he's really had a consistent message about what they're trying to do right now. Right now is really all about instilling the mindset, the culture, really establishing that identity, if you will, right? And we'll get into that because he spoke towards that again today. But some, Emmanuel Forbes, the punt returner. B-Rob says we might be running some no-huddle offense. Jayden Daniels' work ethic seems to be a very big topic of discussion and just how great it is to this point already. All of those things and more we will touch on today. So let's start with Dan Quinn and what he had to say at his presser today. It was roughly 12 minutes and some change as he talked to the media. A lot of it about leadership. Obviously, that's what, a lot of people want to talk about because I don't know if you realize it or not. We talked about this a lot last year, but it's one thing to talk about it. It's another thing to kind of see it in action. We were a very young team last year. I think we had ultimately figured out we were the 10th or 11th youngest team in the league, something like that. And I know that doesn't sound like we're super young, but the NFL overall is young. And it's a young man's game. Unlike the NBA where the veterans rule the day, in the NFL, it's a young man's sport. They'll swap out a veteran for a young guy in a heartbeat because they cost less and there's more tread on the tires. And so a lot of times you'll see teams kind of go from a veteran team to a young team and sometimes forget that veterans are the key bridge to success. Like, we lost sight of that, I feel like, as a fan base, because we had gotten old, and we didn't have, like, Jay Gruden's group kind of felt old at the end of his tenure, and Ron got here and he's like, I don't want to let what happened to me in Carolina happen to me here, which is they got old in Carolina. So we kind of fell into that mindset of, hey, we need young players. We need young players. And they preconditioned us to feel that way. So when it came time for veteran leadership, we didn't have a lot of it, frankly. You had your fourth-year guys leading the locker room because they were some of the oldest guys on the team. Once the Brandon Sheriffs, and even he was young, right? He was still working on a rookie deal, right? When he went through the whole franchise tag thing like he did. So, again, outside of Tress Way, until Terry and Duran and Jonathan got their second contracts, we were talking about young guys on rookie deals being the leaders of this football team, essentially. So it's a breath of fresh air to still have those guys here, but also have others with even more experience, guys that have experienced winning, knows what it looks like, be able to come in here and hope to instill that culture here with Washington. So a lot of what Dan Quinn is being asked right now deals with leadership. Quinn is big on leadership, which is why he brought in the players, some of the players that he did or was a part of the brain trust along with Adam Peters and Lance Newmark, and bringing in a lot of the players that he brought in, the Zach Ertz, the Bobby Wagners of the world, those kinds of guys, Austin Eckler, guys that have been around the block a couple of times to help with this very young group of players that they have on this team. Cleveland Farrell is a veteran, seen a lot. Marcus Mariota, same deal, right? Been in the league now almost a decade. So you bring those types of players in, they're going to help kind of set the tone and, help with the young guys too. And so, that was something that stood out about what Dan Quinn had to say. One of the things, rather, that stood out was talking about leadership. Like, he made an example of Emmanuel Forbes fielding punts, and we're going to talk about that here in a second, because that was one of the biggest takeaways from today's round of pressers, especially Dan Quinn's session, is that Emmanuel Forbes is being trotted back there as a punt returner. Not to say that he's going to be the lead punt returner, but you know, this is the time of year where you start to try to figure things out. And Quinn talked about that. Like, this is the time of year when you figure out if a safety can drop down and play dime, right? Which means he can drop down over the slot and play some corner for you and allow you to bring, you know, another safety onto the field. But this guy has the versatility to stay on the field and not have to be pulled completely off the field, right? Does he have the ability to do that? This is the time to figure that out. Can a tight end split out and play wide receiver? This is the time to figure that out. When you get to the regular season, the time for figuring out what a guy can or can't do, it's over with. We should have already explored all of those options and all of those different scenarios and seen them play themselves out in the offseason so that we know what you are able to do, what you aren't able, or what we shouldn't be asking you to do. That's the part about being a coach that I think goes somewhat under the radar, is taking what a guy does well or what he does best and accentuating that and trying to hide his flaws or some of the things that may be deficiencies. Look, you're not going to be great at everything. So what you want to do is stop talking about what a guy can't do. Okay. Let's start talking about what guys can do, and let's put them in positions to do that. And that's what it seems like this staff has brought here to Washington, which is what I've been asking for years. Stop telling me what guys can't do. Start telling me what guys can do, and start putting them in positions. More importantly, don't give me lip service like Eric Bieniemy did last year. Give me action. Start putting guys in positions to be the best versions of themselves. And that's essentially what Dan Quinn has talked about with the leadership and all of that stuff. So how about the left tackle battle? So, I'm starting to feel like I got a double O on the horizon. And a lot of you tried to warn me, and old dense head Louie T didn't want to listen. Feels like the more and more I listen to them talk, and you know I'm big on listening to people talk and taking them at face value when they've given me no reason not to take them at face value. And so far, so good with this staff. Nothing was made mention. And somebody said this, right? Somebody said this. And when they said that, I went back and listened, and I said, damn it, he's right. Somebody said, Louie T, you keep talking about Adam Peters in Orlando, talking about the tackle position. And he mentioned, you know, Cornelius Lucas, and he mentioned the other tackle from Pittsburgh that we had on the roster last year, and he made no mention of Andrew Wiley, and that was my sticking point, right? Andrew Wiley's not starting at tackle, right? He didn't even mention him, and he said, well, specifically he was asked about left tackle, and he was talking about left tackle, and I was like, was he really? So I went back and listened, and I was like, yeah, you're right. He did really mention left tackle. And so when I hear Dan Quinn being asked about the left tackle, specifically the left tackle battle, and he mentions Cornelius Lucas and the rookie Brandon Coleman, I'm like, ugh. Because more likely than not, the winner of that is clearly going to be your starting left tackle. And the loser is probably going to be your swing tackle, more than likely, right? Or if Coleman's the loser, he may kick inside to left guard, rather, right? Who knows? We'll see what happens. But with that said, what I don't envision, right? What I don't envision is the loser of that battle then kicking over to the right side. That's what I don't see happening. Now, it's more likely that takes place if Cornelius Lucas is the loser of that battle and Brandon Coleman asserts himself as the alpha at left tackle. Cornelius Lucas has shown the ability to switch sides with no issues, right? With no ill effects. We don't know that Brandon Coleman can come in and play right tackle without having a setback, having to retrain his body, how to get out of his stance, which hand to punch with, all of the things that are nuanced that you have to then retrain your body with muscle memory and things of that nature. We don't know that he won't have to go through a transitional period if he kicks to the right side, because this guy mainly played the left side in college. Whether it's guard or tackle, he was on the left side of that offensive line. So I don't think it's going to be this seamless transition for him at right tackle. So I just view him as a left tackle or a left guard, right? I don't view him on the right side right now, whereas Cornelius Lucas can do both. But what it sounds like to me is the loser is going to be relegated to maybe swing tackle potentially. We'll see. Whatever the case may be, it sounds more and more like Andrew Wiley is going to be our starting right tackle. I don't want to admit this now, and I'm gonna hold on as long as I can, but it sounds like mistakes were made on my part. But again, it's early. We'll see what happens. But I've got an eerie feeling now that this left tackle battle that's brewing over here means that the right tackle position, they're just going to leave it as is for now, and they'll come back and circle around next year and upgrade that position. But for now, this may be what we're left with. I'm not happy about it, but it is what it is, right? I'm taking sort of the Charles Leno Jr. approach of, you could do a lot worse than Andrew Wiley, but that's not how you want to live in this league. Knowing that you can do a hell of a lot worse, but also knowing you can do a hell of a lot better too. But he did speak on that left tackle battle between between Brandon Coleman, the rookie, third round pick out of TCU, and Cornelius Lucas. And he said how they're going to continue to do is just rotate these guys in and out, continue to let them get first team reps, see how guys are doing, and then kind of figure out who is going to get, the lion's share of those reps as they hit training camp. But again, keep in mind, right, that we're in OTAs. There are no pads. It's hard to really assess, who's doing what. All you're really trying to do is kind of get them into the rhythm of what it is they're going to be asked to do in this particular scheme with Cliff Kingsbury, right? And the more reps that they get at knowing what to do, the faster they'll be able to play once the pads do get on, right? So again, I don't want to overreact, but it's sounding more and more every day like Andrew Wiley is going to be penciled in as the right tackle. Doesn't mean he'll be the starter there, but it feels like he's going to get, the right of first refusal of the spot, which is not what I wanted to hear. But again, we'll circle back and talk about that at a later date and time when things become a little bit more crystal clear. But I'm reading the tea leaves, and they don't favor the kid right now. Anyway, let's get to the juicy, salacious stuff, and that's Emmanuel Forbes fielding punts. So this is the first time we heard of this. Clearly, and maybe I'm not listening to enough podcasts. Maybe Ben Standing had this on his podcast last week, and I'm just getting wind of this. But he asked the question as if they knew he had been fielding punts, and he just kind of flippantly asked DQ about Emmanuel Forbes being back there fielding punts. And I was like, come again? Excuse me? And he's like, yeah, so, Forbes has a background, as a guy that when he gets the ball in his hands, he turns into a pseudo returner, right? Now, he has never fielded punts, not in high school, not in college, and obviously to this point, not in the pros. But we've seen him with the ball in his hands be tough to get down on the ground. If you look at some of his high school footage, he was also an offensive guy a little bit. And you see when he gets the ball in his hands, he's zigging and zagging in and out of traffic. He's eluding guys, and he's finding pay dirt. And he did it in college with all the touchdown returns, and he did it in high school. And so there is a track record of him being dynamic with the football in his hands. They've seen that, obviously. They understand that. And so they're like, hey, what more ways can we utilize this guy and maximize the skill set that he brings? Clearly, I've already told you guys this. We don't have any returners of any kind on the roster right now, right? Like, we don't have a premier kickoff return guy. We don't have a dynamic punt returner. If Jamison Crowder is the best you got as a punt returner, your punt return game is pretty limited, right? He should have scored a touchdown last year against Atlanta. He was too slow to do so, right? Great job of getting into the open and into the clear and breaking a tackle, but he still got caught from behind, right? So at the end of the day, we don't have a definitive answer at either kickoff or punt return right now, and both figure to be much bigger parts of the game with the rule changes this year than ever, in the past, I should say. In the past, 5 years or so since they moved the kickoff rules up and where they were kicking the ball off from, and we've seen just an influx of touchbacks, and then they broke up the wedge and all of the things that you could do to gain an advantage. Since we've seen them try to reduce the amount of concussions, you've really seen the erosion of the kick return game. Well, that looks like it could return in a major way this year, and they're exploring all options, including putting Emmanuel Forbes back there potentially as a punt returner. Now, I know a lot of you want to draw conclusions like, oh, does this mean that they don't see Emmanuel Forbes as a viable option at corner? Not necessarily. It could be them saying to themselves, look, we may have better options at corner, and we want this kid to be on the field and play and impact the game because we think he can do so, even if he's not on the field in a defensive capacity as much as he would like to be. We want him to stay engaged, and then when that opportunity does present itself, he needs to be ready. But I don't know if there's a direct correlation between the two. I just think they look at Emmanuel Forbes. I think this is more an indictment of what we have as punt returners on the roster right now. Less about Emmanuel Forbes, the corner, more about the lack of options right now and just trying to figure out if somebody can stand out amongst the group of punt returners. That's why they went out and signed Damiere Byrd. That's why you bring in a Zacchaeus, Olamide Zacchaeus. This is why Jamison Crowder was brought back on a one-year deal, because they're trying to figure out, can we find a guy to give us a spark? Because that's going to be a huge part of the game this year. I really believe special teams is going to play an even bigger role than in past years. And they're trying to unlock something there, and maybe Forbes gives them something. We don't know. You don't know unless you try, right? I've been having discussions with my guy, Derek B, about Brandon Coleman potentially starting. He's against it wholeheartedly. And I'm like, bro, you don't know what he can do unless you give him an opportunity. I'm not telling you that he's the answer in year one, first week of the season. I'm just telling you, you don't know if you don't give him a chance. How are we supposed to know what the guy can or can't do if you don't give him a chance to prove he can or can't? Same thing with Emmanuel Forbes. He may be an awful punt returner, and they may figure that out over the next few weeks before they even get to training camp. He might be dynamic, and he may show flashes of a guy that could potentially do something, and then they give him even more opportunities into the summer, right? Who knows? But it's just fun to hear them talk about maybe utilizing him in a different way. And I think why I get so excited hearing this is because the last group would never, right? They would never try something like this. I mean, we were begging for a guy like Jahan. Look, if you're not going to give him the football on offense, at least put him back there on punt returns and let him touch it. Jesus, what is it going to kill you to put a guy that has experience as a return man to let him touch it a little bit? And they would never, right? They would rather put Dax Milne back there and get 3 yards in a cloud of dust than put Jahan Dotson back there, who has proven when the ball's in his hands, he can be a playmaker. This group is like, nah, we're leaving no stone unturned. I love that they're being out of the box thinkers a bit, right? So that was something else that he talked about. He talked about Jayden Daniels' work ethic, and that's going to be a theme of some of the topics we'll discuss today. Everybody to a man, when they're asked about Jayden Daniels, because there's only so much you can say about him. They don't really know him yet. They've only been around him for a week. They don't actually know this kid and have had time to really acclimate themselves to him and some of his quirks and the things that he brings to the table. But what you can see right away is work ethic. A guy that puts in the work, a guy that shows up early, stays late. You can see that, and Jayden Daniels clearly has left an indelible impression and mark on his teammates and coaches already with his work ethic. And Dan Quinn spoke to that again today, and this is not the first time he's spoken about Jayden Daniels' work ethic. He continues to hammer home that point that he's putting in the work in the film room, in the weight room, on the field. He's putting in the work everywhere. And everyone's taking notice of that. Dan Quinn, one of the things that I thought was the most impactful that he said was, right now is about establishing identity. 11 hats to the football. We established that culture right now, okay? You don't need pads to get 11 guys flying to the football. We can do that right now, right? He said the physicality part will come when the pads come on. But as far as that mindset, that mentality, establishing the identity of what we want to be, rallying to the football, taking it away, 11 hats to the ball, you can do that right now. We don't need pads for that. I love it. Establish that identity now. We'll bring the physicality later when the pads come on. But we can establish that, hey, when that football, if they throw a screen, I want 11 dudes to the football. Nobody loafs. I don't want to see anybody half-assing it. Bust your ass and get to that football. Because you don't know, you could be the guy that recovers a fumble that somebody forces. But because you were loafing on the back end, you weren't there to scoop up that fumble opportunity, right? That's been one of the issues, is we don't create our opportunities, our luck. We wait for something to happen good for us instead of going out and forcing the issue. When you got 11 guys rallying to the football, that's how you make things happen. Good things happen when you're just around the ball. He talked about joint practices, and we heard rumors about this yesterday that were circulating that Washington would have a joint practice with the Miami Dolphins, that second preseason game. And Dan Quinn confirmed that, yes, in fact, Washington does have at least one joint practice lined up. Sounds like he's going to work on maybe some other joint practices potentially with some of the other teams on the schedule. We got the Patriots, and we also have the Jets on the schedule from a preseason standpoint. Those are the three games. The Jets first, the Dolphins second, and then the Patriots last. The only of those three games at home is the final game against the Patriots. So those joint practices won't be anywhere near here. But we are going to have a joint practice with the Miami Dolphins per Dan Quinn. And so I don't think that'll be the only one that we have, to be honest with you. So we'll see what happens. Then the last thing that he said that I really enjoyed was he talked about this process. And he said, think about it as crawl, walk, run. He said, in the film room, that's when you crawl, right? That's when you're learning how to kind of use your functions, right? We talk about motor skills for kids when they're, first born, and developing their motor skills, being able to hold up their head and being able to, tell their brain to tell their hand, move with your arm, move your knee so that you can crawl, right? And then ultimately stand up. You're not going to fall, balance yourself so you can walk. And then he says, we then go through these walkthroughs, at half speed to kind of hammer home the things that we talked about in the film room. That's the walking period. And then when you get out on the field, that's when you run. That's when you take off. We want you playing at full speed. If there's a disconnect throughout that process, now you're not playing at full speed on the field. Now we need to go back to where there was the disconnect. Was it at the crawl phase? Was it at the walk phase? Because you're not out here running, and that's what we want. We want you to run when you get on the field and play at 110%, because we don't mind mistakes. Just do them at 110%, right? Do them at full speed. That's all we ever ask, right? And if you're not sure about something, this is the time to figure it out, right? So he talked about crawl, walk, run. And he's like, that's what we're trying to instill in them right now. And, the film room is the crawl. You get out and you do these things at half speed, and you do these walkthroughs. That's the walk. And then you get out here on the field, and we want guys flying around. That's the run portion. So love it, love it, love it, love it. We heard from B-Rob, running back, who I think is going to have a massive year, right? I think he's due, right? If he's healthy, man, this guy's an incredible running back. I really love what we have in Brian Robinson Jr. And so I'm really looking forward to seeing him in this offense. And so he talked about Cliff Kingsbury's offense and building an offense around his players. How many times have we heard that, right? Again, it's a breath of fresh air hearing it from these players, hearing it from the coaching staff, because Eric Bieniemy lied to us and told us that's what he was going to do last year, and then he didn't do that, right? Clearly, he didn't do that. But he lied to us and told us that he wanted to take what guys did well and try to put them in positions to do that. But he also did tell us, I don't give a shit about stats. So he was talking out of both sides of his mouth, and ultimately the part about not giving a shit about guys' stats ultimately was what he really meant, right? I don't really care about Terry McLaurin getting to 1,000 yards. When in actuality, it's not about caring about guys' stats. It's just understanding who your best players are and getting them the football. They'll get the stats if you just get them the ball, right? It's not about going out of your way to make sure that Terry gets 1,000 yards. It's just by nature of getting your best player the ball, he will get 1,000 yards. And that's what he failed to understand. He lacked that understanding of just get the best players involved and everything else will happen, right? So B-Rob is like, he's building this offense around his players. How many times have we heard that this offseason? And he's like, that's so refreshing. He also talked about Cliff's faster tempo. He says, I don't want to say too much, but as far as the type of plays we're going to run, but he said it does feel like we're going to have a quote unquote no huddle type of offense. Do you know how long we've been yearning for some tempo? Not necessarily, Chip Kelly, no huddle every single play, trying to be fast all the time, go, 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 mashing your foot on the gas pedal. But we've talked about just changing the tempo. Scott Turner would never do it. Eric Bieniemy never did it, right? Just utilizing different speeds and paces, right? Sometimes it's as little as just not having a full huddle. Like, for instance, we see all the time with the Rams under Sean McVay. They'll do this kind of like muddle huddle where they'll kind of just like be like 2-3 yards behind the ball and then sprint up to the line up. And it's just a different look for the defense. Defense is all disheveled and they're unset. And now they can go out there, run the play and catch them off guard, right? Like that's the kind of stuff that I'm talking about. And to hear him talk about that, it'd be nice with 8 minutes and 17 seconds in the first quarter to see them go no huddle or up tempo, right? And then the next possession, not do up tempo or no huddle at all. Like that's the kind of stuff like we're not asking for them to turn into a college football team, where they're trying to snap the ball with 20 seconds left on the play clock. We just want them to give the defense different looks. And if this no huddle type of offense is a reality and it's something that they're actually going to do from time to time, oh my God, like we used to get upset because Sam Howell was at his best, you could argue, in some of that no huddle up tempo type of off. They never did it last year, except for when we got in those situations. And we saw in some of his best moments last year, at the end of the first Eagles game, at the end of that Seahawks game, we saw him at his best in certain moments where he was just going, go, 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 right? Getting to the line of scrimmage, calling out a play, and then getting rid of the football, right? We saw him at his best in a lot of those situations, and they failed to put him in those situations. So this is exciting. And then lastly, from B-Rob, he said he's feeling a lot like pre-gunshot B-Rob. He's like, this is the first time that I'm feeling like myself, like really, really starting to feel like how I felt when I first showed up on the scene when I was drafted. People, I keep bringing this up because I'm guilty of this. People forget that he got shot, because he came back so quickly. He was so blessed and so fortunate to not have that bullet strike an artery or really no major arteries or ligaments or muscles or anything like that. So he was able to recover relatively quickly for someone getting shot and having the bullet go all the way through. And so we kind of forget that he got shot. And that you don't just, it's almost like sustaining an ACL tear or an Achilles. You're not the same guy for the next whole season. And although he was technically healthy, he wasn't the same guy yet. And we saw flashes of brilliance from him. And him saying, bro, I'm getting back to, and remember what he was that preseason. We were excited about him in that preseason. I'm looking forward to seeing what he's going to do in this offense. I really, truly am. You go to Bobby Wagner, B-Wags. I found him to be hilarious. I think you're starting to see that Bobby has an incredible personality, that he's funny and he's witty. And we heard about the Ninja Turtle stuff. And, I thought that was pretty cool. But you're starting to see that Bobby Wagner, because when he first got here, that first interview he did with the media, it was kind of dry. And you could tell it was like, bro, I really don't want to be here. Like, not I don't want to be in Washington. It's just like, I don't feel like doing this right now. Like, there's a lot of other things I feel like I could be doing right now that I'd much rather be doing. You could tell he was just fulfilling an obligation. Now he's engaged. You can tell that he's starting to settle in. I think the East Coast is still kicking his ass. And he's already mentioned that this is the first time he's been on the East Coast. His entire career has been spent on the left coast. And, you know, I think he's adjusting to the heat. Obviously, he's adjusting to the times. Like he talked about the first thing he said, he's like, man, it's hot out here, right? And I said that yesterday. I don't know about y'all. I don't know where you live and where you're watching this and consuming this from. I'm on the East Coast, right? I'm in the DMV area. And yesterday, it was like 88 degrees outside. And look, I knew it was hot. I don't know why it kind of caught me off guard, but it did. I went outside and I was like, God damn, that heat hit me in my face yesterday for the first time. Like, we're approaching summer. We're not there yet, but that was the first time I got a taste of what this summer might be like. And if that's what this summer has in store for us, boy, it's going to be a brouhaha. This summer's going to be a son of a, all right? Because it was hot yesterday. You know, I got in the car. We got leather seats, and them seats was hot as hell. And I was like, oh, my God, this is terrible. My son got in the car. He was like, Dad, you got to turn on the AC or you got to roll these windows down, bro. So Bobby Wagner was like, yo, it's hot outside. I was like, yo, get used to this. That East Coast heat. It's a different type of hot, right? Because around here, the humidity, it's the dry heat. I've heard this from people. I've never been on the left coast, but I've heard it's more of a dry heat out there. This is more of that wet humid heat. It hits different, right? And he also talked about being on the East Coast and these games starting much later, the basketball games in particular. He's like, man, these 10:30 games are killer. He'll get used to it, but you know, we've had to deal with it our whole lives. Suck it up. You know, we haven't had the privilege of, you know, sitting down at 7:30 and having a game come on and being able to go to sleep at a relatively reasonable time. We had to deal with this shit our entire lives. So we have no sympathy for the left coasters that come over to the East Coast and want to complain about time slots. We've been dealing with our whole lives. But and anyway, he says one of the things that I love the most, a lot of what he talked about was leadership as well, because a lot of people view him as a guy being brought in here to instill culture and be a leader. But I'm looking at him and I'm saying, to hell with all that shit, Bobby. Keep doing what you did last year, which is led your team in tackles and arguably had one of your most productive seasons. You weren't an all-pro, but you still played at a Pro Bowl level. Bring that here. That's what I want. You know, the leadership is an added bonus. Keep playing the brand of football that has led you to be a no doubt about it first ballot Hall of Famer. Bring that here. That's what I want to see in 2024, right? So he said, this ain't Seattle, essentially. Like, people keep talking about him and Quinn getting together and kind of talking about some of the things they did in Seattle and what they can instill here. And he's like, no. We didn't talk about any of that stuff. You know, we did some pretty special things in Seattle, but one thing that I want to make sure everybody understands is this ain't Seattle. This is Washington, and we want to instill a new culture here. We're going to take some of the things that were successful in Seattle and bring them here, but we need you to understand this ain't that. This is a whole different vibe, and we want to instill a new culture and a new vibe here. Again, that's music to my ears. I don't want to be the Washington Seahawks. I want to be the Washington Commanders, right? I want us to be who we are and be the best version of us. And I think guys like Bobby Wagner are going to help us reach that potential and get that much closer to our ultimate goal of being a consistent winner. Even if he's not here to see us, when we become that consistent winner, he'll be one of the guys that helps set the foundation for what's to come. You're hoping, at least. At least I am. I can't speak for you. He talked about Jayden Daniels' work ethic. Again, that's going to be a theme of what we talk about. His work ethic, off the charts. That's all we've heard is, man, this Jayden Daniels kid is his work ethic. He's like, man, I see it with this kid, man. He's putting in the work. That's one thing I've noticed about him. He's like, look, we haven't been around him a lot, but what I have seen in a little bit of time, in the short time that we've been around each other, is this kid works. He's a grinder, and he's putting in the work, and that's all you can ask for from a young player, right? So, you know, and Bobby then talked about how he became a leader. And he said, you know, I talked to some of the greats that came before me, the Mike Singletary's, the Ray Lewis's of the world, and they kind of helped shape and mold me into the leader that I ultimately became. So hopefully he can instill some of that on guys that are here, i.e. a guy like Jordan McGee, who might be our middle linebacker of the future. Who knows, right? This is a great time for him to learn under the tutelage of a guy like Bobby Wagner, and then he may be able to jump into that position next year and hit the ground running. Who's to know? You know, who's to say, right? But this is a great opportunity for all of those linebackers, including a guy like Jordan McGee, who we drafted this year in the 5th round. So let's get to John Allen. John Allen talked about being truly reinvigorated and having this be a dream job, essentially. Like, you could tell that he was fed up last year. It was no secret, you know. Do-Rag John was on a different level. He was on a new level. He was on a new level. He was so fed up last year that his shit went viral and went national. You know, people were clowning us because of, you know, him going off on his locker room tirades and shit, right? And he had multiple tirades last year, to the point where some of the fan base started like revolting against him, like, man, you shut up. You ain't doing shit, right? Like, and I was like, y'all chill, right? He one of us. Like, he going through this shit too, all right? And you like, nah, man, we ain't trying to hear that shit. He ain't doing nothing. And I'm like, hey, it's when it's that bad at the top, it spreads like a vicious virus to the entire. Nobody did shit last year. Terry barely got 1,000 last year. Nobody did nothing. It was a hard culture to thrive in a season ago, okay? So I gave John a pass, and I wasn't one of those, if you don't want to be here, you can leave type of people. I knew he was frustrated, but I also said, if you don't want to be here and you tell that to the next staff and they get you out of here, I wish you nothing but the best. If that's what you really truly want. I knew he was frustrated, and you gotta let people vent. And you also need to give them their space to decompress when the season is over. And when he talked to the junkies and he said, you know, he wants to explore all of his options and, you know, all of that good stuff, the season was fresh. He was still frustrated. He wanted to know, like, nobody wants to keep hitting the reset button. Nobody wants to keep starting over. You know, you want to eventually you want to start to see things stack on top of each other, and you start to see a cumulative effect where you can see the work that you put in last year leading to a growth this year, leading to success the next year. You want to see what you're doing build on top of each other. You don't want to keep saying, all right, we starting over again. All right, 2 years later, we starting over again, and nothing carries over. So he just wanted to know, hey, what are y'all doing? Are y'all really going to start this thing over, blow it up from the ground up, and truly have this be a 5-year plan? Because if that's the case, y'all can just go ahead. I don't have 5 years, bro. I'm about to be 30 years old in a little bit. Like, I don't have time for that shit. So he's like, look, Dan Quinn and Joe Witt Jr. and Adam Peters and all these guys have come in, and they've reinstilled a culture that is one that leads to winning. He's like, this feels like Alabama. You know, he's big on that Bama shit. And we saw them. I don't know if y'all saw the military exercise that they were doing. Like, they were all holding that big ass log, right? And that's a team building exercise. They do that in the military, where everybody, essentially, it's an exercise to show that everybody has to carry their portion of the weight. If you don't do your job, the rest of your teammates suffer, right? That's why they do that in the military, to establish that we're a team. As you go, we all go, right? You got to have the guy next to you. You got to have his back at all times. And they got to be able to rely on you to do your job and to carry your weight. So they're all holding that log, and everybody's got to hold up that log, because if somebody lets go, now the weight is unevenly distributed, right? And now it could cause everybody to suffer. So they're doing little exercises like that to instill that, hey, we a team, and we got to grind together. And all of us individually are talented, but together we can be an unstoppable force. And, you know, I think Jonathan Allen, being a military baby, feeds off of that kind of environment. He loves the energy that's going on right now. He's a different guy, Jonathan Allen is, right? He's happy-go-lucky Jonathan Allen right now. And I always love that he tempers everything with, hey, we ain't done shit. We ain't won no games. We don't win games in May. They don't actually start taking score that matters until September, but it does feel good. I will say that. It does feel good, but he does keep it in its proper perspective. This feels good, but until we start winning, it won't feel great. I love it. So he's like, and, you know, you can tell guys don't want to shit on the last group, but they say things indirectly, kind of a passive-aggressive approach at taking shots at the last group. And, you know, we've seen guys kind of say, hey, this feels different. You know, and that's not them saying anything disrespectful. It's just them acknowledging that the shit it was a mess last year. It didn't feel cohesive. And Jonathan Allen said, he said this 4 times, everybody's on the same page in 4 different ways. Like, we're all on one accord, essentially. Meaning we weren't with the last group. So again, that's another thing. And we've heard that from multiple people too. Like, everybody's all on one accord. And he talked about Jayden Daniels' work ethic. Again, I'm beating a dead horse, but it's so refreshing to hear that your rookie quarterback that you hope is your franchise guy is kind of exhibiting that work ethic that's ultimately going to take him where he wants to be as a player. And Jonathan Allen says, look, I pride myself on being one of the first guys at the building, you know, first guys here in the morning. And Jayden Daniels is beating me to the building, and he's staying late. And so the work ethic is the first thing that I've already seen from the young fella. And when you're getting the attention of the veterans and they're commenting on your work ethic, you're taking steps in the right direction and get that C on your chest in year 1. Like, Dwayne Haskins was given the C, right? He was given the C because Ron Rivera thought that's what you should do to the quarterback, is just give him the C. He didn't earn it. Dwayne Haskins wasn't. They remember they shitted on him when they traded him. They talked about him not putting in the work in the film room. They knew that already, and they still gave him a C. Right? You got to earn that C. You got to earn it. Jayden Daniels is taking steps to try to earn that. I don't know if he's going to get it in year 1 or not, but damn it, he's putting in the work, and I love to hear it. And then lastly, Marcus Mariota. We heard from old Mariota. He talked about Jayden Daniels commanding the huddle. And, you know, he said as a rookie, that's one of the hardest things to do because you're young and you come in and, you know, you just want to kind of fit in, but you have to be assertive. And he said one of the things we're seeing from Jayden, he said the more that you know, the more work that you've put in and the time and the effort you've put in, the more confident you are in calling out the play, telling guys where to line up, because you can tell people what to do when you know what to do. And so he's like, Jayden is showing that command of the huddle at a very young age and early in his process. And that's a sign of a guy that's putting in the work and the time. He said, and he talked about the quarterback room overall. And he's like, you know, I've been in a lot of quarterback rooms, and the key is to not have it be adversarial. You know, we're all competing. Yes, we all want to play, but at the end of the day, we all need to be pushing each other to get better, and we all need to be supportive of one another. This is why you bring veterans like Marcus Mariota into the locker room. First of all, there was a lot of Mariota hate when we signed him. I don't know where that came from. I love Marcus Mariota. I think he's going to be a fantastic teammate, and I think he's going to be exactly what we need in that quarterback room. And if he has to play, I'm not worried. I'm not worried. Just like when I said about Jacoby Brissett last year, if he has to play, I won't be worried. You know, I wasn't the biggest Jacoby Brissett fan, but I do understand the value that he brings to the table. Same thing with Marcus Mariota. He's going to be just fine in this offense. He talked about the Brian Johnson effect, and he used Brian Johnson as an example to make a bigger point, which is Adam Peters and Dan Quinn have surrounded the players with good people in the building. And we've heard that before too, right? Like, this is a building full of really good, like we've been harsh on O-line Bobby Johnson. One thing I can tell you about O-line Bobby Johnson, he's full of energy and life. Okay. He loves being a coach. He loves coaching the offensive line. And some of the players have talked about his influence and the energy that he brings. And he's just a good dude. He's a good person, right? We don't know if he's a good coach or not. But he's a good dude. And Dan Quinn, we know, is a good dude. We've heard that to a man from every single person, guys inside and outside the building. So the thing now is they've surrounded the players with good people. I was reading an article yesterday. Miami Dolphins safety Javon Holland talked about their new defensive coordinator, Anthony Weaver, who we interviewed for the head coaching job here. He was in Baltimore as the assistant defensive line coach, and he's now the defensive coordinator in Miami. And something stood out. It was kind of jarring to hear a player say this. He was like, yeah, we love Weave, man. He's an awesome dude. He said, as players, we want to be coached by good people, right? And that was a shot directly at Vic Fangio. He's like, he went on to say, you know, he listens to us as an ex-player. He understands what we're going through, and he tries to relate to us, and he tries to figure out what it is we want to do and how we want to go about it. And he's open to having dialogue. And, you know, we didn't have that last year. And the guy that was here last year wasn't a good, you know, he didn't give off vibes of a good dude. I was like, well, damn, right? And that's the guy that's in Philadelphia. So I love to hear that shit. I want him to go there and be an asshole to them because I don't think they're mentally tough enough to handle an asshole in Philadelphia, right? And he's from Philly, so he's got that abrasive personality. So we'll see if he does well in Philadelphia. But it just goes back to the point of we got a lot of good coaches here. And he talked about Brian Johnson. He said, man, he's one of the best coaches I've ever, you know, learned from. And he said, you know, part of the reason I wanted to come here was because of Brian Johnson, right? And that connection. And he's like, he's a special guy. And, you know, the more I hear about Brian Johnson, the more I realize he got a raw deal in Philadelphia last year. He wasn't running his offense because we were blaming him for those quarterback draws on 3rd and 9. We were putting that in the lap of Brian Johnson. And it seems like he was handcuffed last year. He wasn't allowed to do the things that he should have been allowed to do as an offensive coordinator. So I'm excited about the group that we've assembled, you know, as a staff. And Brian Johnson, if he has to take over as the next offensive coordinator, I'm excited about what we've kind of put in terms of an infrastructure, being that if a coach gets a head coaching gig, we've got guys that can step in and seamlessly transition into that position. We don't have to have wholesale changes. You know what I mean? We never had that with the last group. If someone were to get a job, we would have been screwed. We weren't in a position where someone was in-house that could take over and we could kind of keep the party going, so to speak. Mariota says, Cliff's offense is quote-unquote fun, right? He said he's building an offense around our skill set. And he said the offense may look totally different when I'm in there versus Jayden being in there. That's what we want to hear. Remember when Kyle and Mike were here, and in 2012, Robert Griffin III ran one offense. He got injured. What did they do? They ran a totally different offense for Kirk Cousins against Cleveland, and that got Robert bent all out of shape. If Robert was smart, he would have understood. We're two different players with two different skill sets. So the offense they run with Kirk isn't going to look like the offense they run with you because you're two different players, and your skill set suggests that you should be running two totally different offenses. Kirk Cousins shouldn't be running read option. Where the hell is he going to run, right? He should be running boots. And he should be getting out of the pocket and running rollouts and things of that nature. And so that's the essence of a great coach. You take the talent that you're given and you build an offense around his skill set. And Mariota's like, what I do and what Jayden does, totally different skill sets. And so the offense is going to look different if I'm in there versus if Jayden's in there. Yes! Brilliant! He says, you can't put a label on Cliff's offense because he's building it around us. So there's no label to be put on it. Everybody wants to put that, you know, that tag of what the hell is the offense called? Why am I blanking on the name of the offense right now? Y'all help me. Put it in the comment section. What's the name of the damn offense Cliff Kingsbury is supposed to be running that everybody wants to kind of, you know, put him in the box and say this is the kind of offense he's running? Air raid. Thank you, Virginia Slim. Air raid. And even Cliff Kingsbury has said, bro, it's not, you can't just call it the air raid. And you keep asking, it's almost like somebody wants the players and the coaches and, you know, even people outside of the building to say, yeah, it's air raid. And everybody's like, you can't, like, because it's a mashup of different offenses. Like Cliff's offense isn't just strictly air raid principles. It's not just that. He's not Mike Leach who just runs air raid, right? He, God rest his soul, anyway. He's not just running air raid. He is running different concepts. So I love that everybody continues to hammer that home. Like, bro, it's not just the air raid. All right, it's not just air raid. So, and then another thing I loved about what Marcus said, he said, look, I was humbled a long time ago. Like I put my pride and my ego aside and I checked that at the door when I was in Tennessee. I got humbled. They benched my ass, right? I was the number 2 pick in the draft and they benched my ass in favor of Ryan Tannehill. So I got humbled in Tennessee. From that point forward, I understood this was a business and what my role was going to be moving forward. And I've played my part ever since. I know what I'm coming in here to do. I'm going to compete and I'm going to, move forward as if I'm the starter. But I know damn well that they drafted a kid here, number 2 overall, and I know what my role is. He didn't say this, but he insinuated this. I want to play. We all want to play. And I'm coming in here to compete, but I also know what's good, right? I've been in this situation before. So I know what's really good, and I know what I'm being brought in here to do, and I'm going to play my role. And if my number gets called and I got to go out there and I got to start, I'll be ready. If they need me in the second quarter for 3 plays, I'll be ready. If they need me for the final 2 quarters of the game, I'll be ready. If they need me for a 4-week stretch, I'll be ready. But whatever my role is, if they don't need me to play a single offensive snap, I'll be ready for that too, right? Again, that's what you want to hear from your backup quarterback, right? Guy that's been through it, who was the number 2 overall pick, who was a Heisman Trophy winner. He's seen what Jayden Daniels is about to go through. He's seen that already. He's lived that already. He knows the pressure and the expectations that come with being the former number 2 overall Heisman Trophy winning pick of a team, and the franchise and the weight of the franchise being put on your shoulders. He knows what that feels like. So anyway, I digress. So that was really the gist of what was said today. A lot of interesting things. Could we potentially see Emmanuel Forbes returning punts? Don't know, but it's interesting to play around with that idea. And maybe, just maybe, they'll put some other guys back there that, may be able to help in that regard. And I'm not telling you that you got to put Jahan back there every time, but just like, Joe Gibbs would put Darrell Green back there for special occasions, or the Philadelphia Eagles would put Deshaun Jackson back there for special occasions. Sometimes you give your guys an opportunity to make plays sometimes, right? The Chiefs would put Tyreek Hill back there on special occasions. Maybe they do that with Jahan. Maybe this group they think outside the box enough to know that, every situation isn't the same. And if the magnitude of a situation is that great, maybe we take a guy that we don't normally put back there and we give him an opportunity. Who knows? We'll see. Maybe Forbes is one of those dudes that has immense potential back there, but they don't make him their every, day punt returner, but every so often they trot him back there and give him an opportunity. Who's to say? We'll see what happens. I'm just excited about everything that's going on right now with this team, from the front office building and the pieces that they're putting together there, to the roster and the staff, and the integration of the offense, and the really just the identity that they're trying to establish. All of these things scream of and reek of, hey, things are being done differently. And you know what I'm about to say, but I'm going to say it anyway. It feels different because it is different. Okay. Anyway, I digress. Let's get to the comment section real quick and I'll get y'all out of here. I'm not going to hold y'all too long. My guy, Derek B. Thank you for the super chat. Greatly appreciate you. Thank you for being a member of the MOBB. Derek B writes, Jahan equals punt returner. What the F are we saying for him? Saving him for? CD equals punt returner 2 years. We talking about CD Lamb. We had this, me and Derek B have had these conversations ongoing for the last year. He's been adamant that Jahan should have been put back there on, and I didn't disagree with him, right? I didn't disagree with him. And I don't know if Derek B was saying that he should be the every punt returner, right? Like every time we force a punt, Jahan is back there returning punts. I think Derek B was saying this too, because CD Lamb, I don't think he's back there every single time returning punts, but for those first 2 years, he would get back there quite a bit, right? But in special situations, in certain instances, you want your best players touching a football, right? And if a guy like we saw what Jahan was capable of when he's gotten the ball in his hands against the Giants and against the Cowboys in certain games, where he's catching the football and he's a dynamo with the ball in his hands, run after catch. That Giants catch and run where he spins and he scores the touchdown to tie that game, send it to overtime. Like, that's a special play, right? We haven't had guys that can do that on offense here in Washington in quite some time. Like Curtis Samuel was a guy that could do that as well, which is why you would like to have seen them get the ball in his hands in space a little bit more than they ultimately did. But We haven't had a lot of those guys. Jahan is one of those dudes. So you'd like to see them say, you know what? You had experience as a punt returner. Let's get you back there a little bit. Not every single punt return, but every so often, big spot. Why not? Let's see what you got. And they just refused. The last group didn't think outside the box, which is why we didn't get personnel package groups, which is why we never moved guys around. It was static and it was stale, and we couldn't find ways to get certain players who had a certain skill set, which is what Dan Quinn talked about. You're going to have certain guys that have certain skill sets that you need them to perform in this particular situation a certain way. This is the time where you work on those things, right? We had Khaleke Hudson, who had a specific skill set that you could have utilized, and we just said, nope, he can't play. Where's the psychological sense? What'd you draft him for then? If you're not going to find a way to utilize what he can do well, what the hell did you draft him for? What's the point, right? The point is you draft guys because they have a specific skill set that you think you can tap into, and you find ways to get them on the field. How else are you going to figure out if they can contribute or not if you don't give them a chance? If you don't try to find out what it is they do well so you can tap into that. And so me and Derek B have been talking about guys like Jahan should be returning punt. If you don't have a true difference maker, you don't have a Cordero Patterson as a kickoff return man, or you don't have a dynamic punt returner, what are you doing? Why not put Jahan back there a little bit? Why not try Emmanuel Forbes and see if he can do something there? I love it. Video channel. Been a member for 10 months. Thank you for being a member. Who writes, sup, Lou? Sup, video channel. Any idea on the breakdown of touches for Austin and B-Rob? I don't know, how that's going to look. Obviously, I expect B-Rob to be our bell cow, the guy that touches it the most. But and I thought Derek B, who brought up a great point to me. I keep talking about, I think they're sleeping on B-Rob as a pass catcher. And part of the reason they brought Austin Eckler in here wasn't just because of his pass catching prowess or his ability to find the end zone, because he has a hell of a nose and a knack for finding the end zone, something we've struggled with. So that was another reason for bringing him in here. But he also made a point that I keep glossing over that's very important, and that's pass protection, especially with a young quarterback. You need your running back to be able to get in there, stick his nose in there, and protect the quarterback. And Brian Robinson has not shown the ability to consistently do that at a high level, enough to where you feel comfortable with him being on the field on third downs a ton right now. So a guy like Austin Eckler provides you with the ability to bring a guy in that does know pass protection, that does an adequate job of holding up there and giving the quarterback that extra split second that they need to get rid of the football. And that's something Brian Robinson can definitely improve upon. He was not great at that. And so I think that's something he needs to continue to improve upon. And that's another part of the reason why Austin Eckler was brought in here as well. So I think you're still going to see the lion's share of the touches go to Brian Robinson. But, Austin Eckler is a dynamic player. And so you want him to get his fair share of touches. It wouldn't shock me. It just, again, what's ultimately going to decide how often our backs touch it is how dynamic the offense is and how many points we're scoring. And if we're up on top of the opponent, it's hard to stick with the run and be, assertive and aggressive with the run when you're down 2 scores, when you're trailing and you have to start throwing the football a little bit more. So if we're able to get up on teams and you get into your 4-minute offense in the fourth quarter and you're able to run the football, or you're up early in a game, you can try to start working on the clock and being assertive that way. These are all things that will lend itself to us allowing the backs to touch it more. But I expect Brian Robinson to touch it, and I expect it to be somewhat of a 2-to-1 ratio. So B-Rob might have 21 touches in the game. Austin Eckler might have 10, right? Like I expect it to be something like that, a 2-to-1 ratio. B-Rob might have might have 18 touches. Eckler might have 9 or 10. So 2-to-1, essentially on the ratio. That's how I see it working itself out. But, obviously we'll see when the time comes. But that's kind of the vision that I have for it. If B-Rob touches it 23 times, Eckler's touching it 11, right? That's kind of how I see it. But, we'll see what happens ultimately. But anyway, I digress. So That's essentially, phase 2 OTA day number 1. A lot coming out of that. I'm looking forward to seeing what, we hear out of, OTA day number 2 tomorrow, who they allow to step to the podium tomorrow. And, looking forward to kind of breaking down what they have to say. We'll be live tomorrow night for the Command Post Live. We'll really dive into, I got a number of things I want to talk about. I'm seeing some disrespect being lobbed at us already. And, we are in our bubble. We live in our bubble, and I love our bubble, but our bubble is about to burst. And so I saw some massive disrespect. I'm going to bring it to your doorstep tomorrow night. And in addition to a bevy of other topics, and we'll also talk about what was said at OTA day 2 of phase 2, and so many other things. So we'll get to all of that tomorrow night on the show. But man, feels good to see, what's going on right now, the energy, the vibe. It's all positivity, which it usually is this time of the year. You go back to this time last year, we were probably talking a lot of the same shit. But here's the biggest difference. We're free of the shackles of Dan Snyder, which we weren't this time last year. The sale was not complete until literally July 21st last year, or July 20th, rather, last year. So we weren't free from the shackles of Dan Snyder yet. There was no Adam Peters. We did not have a real general manager. We did not have a real front office this time last year. We did not have a real coaching staff last year this time. And we did not have a franchise quarterback this time last year. We were hoping, people like myself, were hoping that we had our guy last year. We know that this guy's going to get every opportunity. We knew last year Sam had one shot. It was like 8 Mile. Do not miss your chance to go, because opportunity is only going to knock this one time. You better go. Unfortunately, he was dealt a bad hand with his coaching staff. But this is a whole different situation, whole different scenario. So I just want to make sure that we're clear that it feels different, because it is different. Christopher McLaughlin, thank you for the super chat. Greatly appreciate you. Thank you for being a member of the MOBB. I greatly appreciate you, as always. My guy, Chris, thank you for being a member of the MOBB, who writes, "Hey, Lou. What's up, Chris? Hope all is well with you and the family. Likewise, as always, likewise. 2 questions. 1, who would you like to see as our kick returner this season? And 2, how concerned would you be if Forbes is our punt returner and he gets injured, since he is our CB1 now? Is he our CB1 now? We can't make that declaration. He might not be our CB1. The 2 starting corners could. I've already penciled in. The corner from the Chargers. I've already penciled him in as CB2. The question is, who's CB1? It could be Forbes, but it could also be Benjamin St. Juste. Like, this thing isn't etched in stone, right? That just because they showed up on the scene, Emmanuel Forbes is going to be given. They're not clearly. If you haven't been paying attention, then you think then Emmanuel Forbes is going to be the CB1. But if you're paying attention and you're listening to what's being said, and I told you this time of the year, you should be focused more on what's being said and less about action, right? Because the action that takes place in the summer is more important than the actions that are taking place now, because they're simulating football right now. They're not actually playing football. They actually start playing football in summer. So I listen to what they say a little bit more, because they're telling us how they feel. And all they've talked about is competing. That's it. Competing. That's it. So Forbes is going to get a chance to compete. But if he doesn't play well, if he's not competing at a higher level than Benjamin St. Juste, he won't be the starter, right? So to assume that he's our CB1, I think would be, I think you would be doing yourself a disservice to assume that he's CB1. And you can put your CB1 back on punt returns every so often. I wouldn't make him, if you're relying on him to be your best corner, You can't put him back there to be your every, punt returner, but you can put him back there in some big spots, right? So if he's back there on punt returns on an every punt return basis, it's probably because he's not starting, more likely than not. Doesn't mean he won't contribute in some way, shape, or form, right? But it'll probably mean he's CB3, right? Or CB4 if you count the nickel, which Mikey Sane will probably be, But if we're just talking about boundary, he's the third boundary corner at that point. If he's your every punt returner. But again, it's early. They're just trying stuff right now. They're spitballing right now. Don't get too carried away with it. But it's just good to know that they're thinking outside the box. This is what this means to me, is that they're willing to think outside the box, which the last group was not willing to do, right? And then you asked, who would I like to see as our kick returner this season? I don't even know what to tell you. I don't know who is any good at it, right? I wish I had a definitive answer for you, but I don't. I don't know if there's a guy on this roster right now who has kick return ability. I think Mikey Sane still might have a little bit of kick return ability, but in order for us to maximize the kick returning position, you'd have to put a guy on the roster that right now isn't on the roster. The best natural kick returner on the roster is a guy that's not slated to make the team right now. Okay. It's the receiver / playmaker from UCLA that was undrafted here last year. He's the best natural kick returner that we have, but he couldn't make the team because he couldn't contribute on special teams as a gunner. He wasn't going to be your primary punt returner because he fumbled in the preseason, and he's not a natural punt returner because he didn't do it in college. So he struggled with that. So if he can establish himself as a punt returner, and we know he can be a kick returner, and he can show that he can catch the ball, he could probably make the team. Kaz Allen, thank you, Virginia Slim. Michael Davis, Jr. Nemhart is who I was thinking about as CB2. All right. That Michael Davis is our CB2. I'm penciling him in as CB2. So who's starting opposite of him? That's up for grabs right now. And Kaz Allen, to me, is the best natural kick returner on the team, but he's not slated to make the team right now. So again, we'll see what happens. But I just want somebody back there that will strike fear in the opposition. I don't want to put a guy back there for the sake of saying, let's just put a guy back there. With the rule changes, we need a guy that can actually pop one and take it the distance. So we'll see if that guy even exists on the roster. Anyway, I digress. That's going to do it for me, your man Louie T, here on the Command Post Live. You know what it is. Post up. Take command. I look forward to chopping it up with you guys on the next show, which is tomorrow night, where we got a lot to discuss, and we'll be talking about OTAs some more. We'll be talking about a number of topics, so hopefully you'll lock in with the kid tomorrow night. In any event, you guys enjoy the rest of your day. Have a good one. God bless. Good night.